How's it, Rob? Today we're going to be talking about Sir Alex Ferguson. But before we do, got the standard trivia question for you. And I want to ask you, which manager has managed the most Premier League games?
Which manager has managed the most Premier League games? That's surely got to be Alex Ferguson.
Is Arsene Wenger beats Sir Alex by 18 matches. Arsene Wenger managed 828 games with Arsenal, where Sir Alex managed 810 games for Manchester United.
That's pretty wild. I definitely did not expect that at all.
I didn't either. I'll be straightforward with you. I went to go look at, before we did the episode, I went to go look at my Sir Alex Ferguson stats. And when I saw that, I knew that was the one to bring in as the trivia question today. But the actual question for the episode is quite different. I wanted to ask you, do you think in this day and age, in 2024, Sir Alex Ferguson would still be able to manage?
Oh, geez, Sir Alex Ferguson, would he still be able to? I don't know. That's a very good question. I'm going to need to give an answer quickly. So I'm going to go gut feeling and go no. And the reason why I'm going to go no is simply because of man management. I think back in the 90s and early noughties, you could get away with a lot of, I would probably describe as poor man management, especially around your David Beckhams, the way you treated Roy Keane towards the end as well. Like, you get away with that because social media wasn't as big a thing. You didn't have the Jadon Sanchos of the world putting out a million different statements when things weren't going wrong, or weren't going right, sorry. But I just think he would really struggle with that hairdryer treatment, and it was more of a ruling through fear for a lot of the players. And obviously there were players who loved him, and don't get me wrong, there were definitely players who, Gary Neville clearly had a lot of affection for him, Wayne Rooney clearly had a lot of affection for him, these guys, but for every player who loved him, there's a player who just seems to not hate him, but really, really dislike him. David Beckham doesn't particularly like him after the way he was thrown out, basically. Roy Keane definitely doesn't like him after the way he was thrown out as well. And I think you really struggle in a social media element. I'm not too sure about managerial, though.
Would you say that maybe Pep Guardiola is the modern day Alex Ferguson in terms of success? I know their styles of play were very different, but in terms of the success and domination of at least English football.
I'm going to go really rogue here, and I'd actually put Pep Guardiola closer to Arsene Wenger. And the reason I say this is not because of managerial accolades or trophies or anything, but general impact on football and on the Premier League in the way that I've said this in multiple different videos that we've done, multiple different podcasts, and I have a massive respect for Arsene Wenger because he came in and he changed the face of football. That is what he did. Whether people want to acknowledge that or agree with it, doesn't matter. It's a fact that multiple people who played in that era as well have spoken about. Arsene Wenger came in and changed the face of football more than Alex Ferguson did. Alex Ferguson was fantastic at bringing up players and bringing the youth through with the way that he managed them. But I don't really think that they were innovative. You know, that Man United team, and I'm going to get bollocking, there's going to be 800 blokes in the comments saying, no, he's the greatest manager of all time. I'm not saying he wasn't, but I don't think he was as innovative as Pep Guardiola has been in the modern era, and back then as innovative as Arsene Wenger was when he came to Arsenal. He created a football revolution. It's as simple as that. And that's what Pep Guardiola has done. Pep Guardiola has come in and created a football revolution. It's gone further than Wenger ever did because he has the trophies and the accolades, but also the money behind him that Arsene Wenger didn't have. But I think I would probably liken Pep with Wenger a lot more.
So then if we're going to go with that comparison of Pep with Wenger, maybe Klopp to Sir Alex is a good or maybe a better analysis from the way of like passionate managers who are brilliant at developing a player, because you have to say one of Sir Alex's skills of many was how he could develop those players, Scholes and Giggs and Neville, both of them, by the way. There's a whole bunch of players that he developed in his time there, and obviously Klopp did the same thing. So maybe do you think that's a more likened for
I think that
2024 comparison.
I do think that's a more fair comparison. I don't know, maybe not fair is the right word, but I do think that is a better comparison to make because, like you said, Klopp has come in. He's a passionate manager. He's all about the fan base, and Sir Alex, one of the first things he did was get the fans on board because his first season wasn't fantastic. I don't know if they were close to relegation, but towards the end of the season, but at one point in the season they were definitely down there. But the fans still backed him because they could see something going on, and I think that was the thing that Jurgen Klopp did. He got the fans backing first, and then that allows you the kind of bandwidth to be able to bring through the youth players who will make mistakes. These kids will make mistakes when they come through. You've seen it with every single young player that's come through. They make mistakes when they're young. But the way that Alex Ferguson, and I know I ripped on him for his man management, but I think that's because he had a football manager style of man management where a player got to around 29, 30 and he was like, I don't care about you anymore. You can go. I mean, that's an exaggeration. It was more around that 33, to be fair. I think with the youth, he was very good at bringing them up and creating a player out of raw potential. And Jurgen Klopp is a very similar style of manager. And I think Pep Guardiola, he's obviously had players come through, the Lionel Messi's, but that's not his style. His style isn't to develop an entire team. His style is to create a team and develop one or two players. Whereas Jurgen Klopp and Alex Ferguson definitely developed young players into an entire team.
So with questions like that, would you put him closer to Pep or Klopp or whatever? All I'm trying to do is triangulate where we think Ferguson would kind of land in the landscape of football in 2024. One more manager I'll throw in the loop, and then we can consolidate our findings, so to speak, is Antonio Conte. And the reason I mention him is because he's obviously had a career of coming in. He's quite passionate as well, but he tends to do well for a few years, and then he tends to fall out with owners and players, etc. Which is that kind of what you meant about Ferguson's man management would struggle? Do you see his career maybe managing in a Klopp way, but his career going in the trajectory of a Conte in the way of falling out in 2024 a lot more with clubs and players than he did in his era?
Yeah, I could definitely see it happening, specifically players. I'm not too sure about owners because, to be fair, I don't think the one thing you can't accuse Sir Alex Ferguson of ever being was being a man who bought the league. He developed his team. The class of '92, he developed that. That was what he did. So he was never a manager to go in and do a Jose Mourinho, where he comes in and under Chelsea specifically, where he comes in, spends loads of money to create the team that he wanted. He was very good at developing the team that he wanted. So I don't think you struggle with the owners necessarily, but I do think there will be players, a fair few players, and specifically nowadays with the strength of agents, the strength of social media, and how players are now bigger brands than, I wouldn't say all clubs, but there are definitely some players who have a bigger brand than some of the smaller clubs. And I think that's a struggle that he would really, really have to deal with. And I'm not sure how good he would be at it because, he was a hairdryer treatment kind of manager. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. I mean, you're all grown adults. You should be able to have some bloke shout at you without going into a corner and crying. But I'm not sure everyone can do that. And I think that's where we'd struggle. But the one thing that I previously said that I think Conte has always struggled with is Ferguson gets the fans on his side. And I think Conte, that's the one thing. Because it's all well and good going, he's got player pressure, he's got this, he's got that. But you have to look at the Ten Hag, Jadon Sancho incident. And it was a situation where Ten Hag got backed over Sancho with the fans. And that's where you win or lose your job, really. That's how you keep or lose your job, is by having the fans backing you. If the fans are still on your side, it's a lot harder for an owner to go, well, off you go, I'm not interested in you. Whereas Conte often picked on players who were fairly well liked or hadn't really done that much wrong. It was just it's a bit of a Jose Mourinho at Tottenham situation, It's just bang out one player, or even at Man United with Luke Shaw. He was just consistent Luke Shaw, Luke Shaw, Luke Shaw, to the point where you actually turn the fans off you and onto the player, where it starts going like, actually, he didn't do that badly today. I think you're picking on the wrong player. And I think Alex Ferguson was very good at avoiding that. He would have the behind closed doors hairdryer treatment that probably went too far on multiple occasions, but he didn't really do it in the public.
Yeah, the one thing, so you were saying earlier about some of the areas he might struggle. One thing Ferguson was brilliant at was bringing in a backroom staff around him where he could delegate certain roles and responsibilities to them. So if he wasn't a great coach, which we know he's not because he had Meulenstein and a few other coaches who came in who would actually run the training sessions on his behalf. And he did that throughout his career. So anything that Ferguson would have had a shortcoming for, and he was aware of it. And I think he was quite a self-reflecting manager, so he would have been aware. He would have got someone else in to help him with. I hear you about, like, when it comes to hairdryer treatment, you can't, it's not football manager, you can't ask your assistant to keep giving the team talks after the game. But one area where we just don't know is how he would have managed in the landscape, the transfer landscape these days. You can talk about, oh, you would have got a director of football in and he would have done the transfers, but Ferguson managed in an era where 50 million was a huge amount of money. I know he was there when Ronaldo went to Real Madrid, but that's a sale rather than a purchase. He didn't want to go and spend big money, actually similar to what Wenger had to go through. You know, Wenger had to go through this period towards the end where he had to buy Ozil and players like that and Sanchez for bigger amounts of money. He clearly felt uncomfortable doing and taking that risk. They're similar to you in that way. They don't want to spend the 75 million or more. It's just not worth it. So, but I think in the current football landscape, you kind of have to. You know, if you I spoke on a previous episode, you need a CDM. Everyone knows you need one, and they say, well, we're not selling it to you for under 80. Maybe some of the old school managers go, well, we're just not buying one then. We'll go another season and try find a way where we go double pivot in the midfield and get away without having one, for example. So I just wonder how he would have been able to navigate that system, you know, the transfer system now.
I mean, I'm gonna be honest here. I think Alex Ferguson was there at the start of the turn. You know,
Yeah.
Alex Ferguson was there when Man City came in and started buying players for the big money, and he was there when the transfer market did start skyrocketing, and he did kind of put his foot down and go, well, I mean, you look at the team that he had for his last season that won the Premier League. That should never have been anywhere near winning a Premier League. That was honestly, you look at all those players and where they ended their career, and even like 2 seasons after that, where most of those players were, they weren't at Man United, and most of them were at top level clubs. So he did a fantastic job with the players that he had. And I think there's something to be said about that when it comes to a transfer window, in the fact that you can just turn around and go, you know what, I'm happy with what I have. I'm not interested. So I think he wouldn't be taken for a ride. And I don't know if he'd use a director of football necessarily. You know, I think he'd like to be quite hands-on. But beyond everything, I think the one thing that Alex Ferguson did better than almost any other manager was bring through that youth team. And I think you look at the Man United team that they have now with Mainu, Garnacho, Diallo, those kind of players. I think if you gave Alex Ferguson them, and I might have just talked myself around to a different answer, to be honest. But if you gave Alex Ferguson those 3 players, he's creating a winning team out of them, to be honest. He only needs those 3, really. And he would create that winning team because that's what he did. He developed young players at an astonishing rate. That was what he was known for. And I think if he could get past the hairdryer treatment issues and the leaks in social media and player attitude, the modern player attitude, which I also think is a lot worse than it was back in the 2000s. The modern player attitude and the player power, which we've also spoken about previously. If he could get past those, he would definitely be one of, if not the top manager in modern football.
This is a really interesting episode. Rob's taken himself from anti-Ferguson to pro-Ferguson in one episode, which is great. I'd love to hear from you guys what you think. Do you think Sir Alex Ferguson would be able to manage in 2024 and be as much of a success or even have similar success? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Until then, this has been Football Unspoken.